Cover your eyes. Okay. Chapter 9. First of the year came and time to resume classes. I was back to a busy routine. I would awake at 7 passing and be in class by 9 passing. I was in class until 2 passing. Then I would make my way to the tavern. The table by the stage in the corner became my table. I would sit there and study until 5, and then up on stage, on my breaks, I studied. Study and sing is about all I did. That was actually my routine for the following 4 years. I became well known at Atlantis as Patsy Lee. And those that came and went from the tavern loved me. I really liked being on that stage. It made me feel as if I was someone, and everyone around me made me feel so special. Hard to explain and actually place into words. By the end of my 5th year, I could no longer do my studies at night at the tavern, for when the crowd would see me, they would chant my name, and I would find myself up on stage. And the closer the time came for me to graduate, the more I had to study. I had 5 exams, and I had to pass them. It was the day before graduation. I was on stage singing. After one of my songs, Tony came up on the stage and took the mic. "Greetings, I have something to say. Tomorrow, as you all know, the finishing class of 63 will be graduating. The graduation is from 3 to 7. So my good people, from 3 to 7, this tavern will be closed, as our very own Patsy Lee graduates, and I will be there to see. We'll reopen at 8 passing. Hope to see you all there. And then here," he said. I was in shock. He announced that to the whole tavern. I looked at him and he smiled. "I am very proud of you, and I am certain James is too," he said, and leaned and kissed me on the head. "Thank you, Tony. Thank you for all you have done," I replied, and he handed me the mic and jumped off the stage, and I started to sing. The next day was just great. I graduated, as James had told me I would, with all 5s. Not a day missed or an assignment. I did it. I was actually out of classes for good. Back to singing every day, for there was actually nothing for me to do. I had walked into the tavern that next day around 12 passing, and Tony came up to me and handed me a ticket. I looked to it and looked to it again. I looked at what it was for, the Royal Concert. "You're off the 5th day of this week," he smiled. "'Tis good. I have plans that day." I laughed. "Patsy, you never go nowhere. You never do anything. I thought perhaps you would enjoy the show," he said with a wink, and I nodded to him. That day the concert started at 5 passing. I left the tavern and moved to the concert hall and stood by the stage as the opening band played. I stood and listened. Alexander came out and grabbed the mic. The crowd started to quiet from their talking and moving around. "Welcome, our people of Atlantis. Tonight we are here too," he said and paused. "Sell ye flying pigs." The crowd started to laugh. "What? You do not want to buy flying pigs? What is wrong with flying pigs?" The crowd still laughed. "Fine. I refuse to sell you anything. I will just sing you a lullaby, he said, and the music started, and he started to sing. I danced by the stage and listened to the music. It was all great. Then Mike and the Thunders sung. Then all went crazy when Danny Lee slid out on stage, and I felt my heart jump. Even though I could never have him like everyone else, I loved him. He danced to the side of the stage, and I could have sworn he looked to me and sung to me. However, I knew it was not just to me. It was for I was standing there. He danced away, and I felt I could faint. How infatuated I was with this man, and the way he sung. As Danny moved off stage, Alexander took the mic. "Guess what?" he called out. "You're going to tell us the price of the pigs," someone from the crowd yelled. "Why would you want to buy a pig?" "No, guess again," he called out. "You're not really going to sell us flying pigs?" Another called out. "Mike, Danny, Jim, John, this crowd has a thing about pigs," he called, and everyone laughed. "All right, you're very poor guessers. So, I will just have to tell you. We are going to be in the kingdom for the next year's cycle. So just from your request, we will do a show every 5th day from 6 to 9 passing. Tickets may be purchased wherever they are purchased, and you do not get a free pig," he said, and everyone cheered and laughed. "If you cannot afford a ticket, you are welcome to stand outside and listen. If you can afford a ticket, you are welcome to come inside and not listen. 'Tis only fair," Alexander said, and Jim came out and took the mic. Then the others came out, and they sung a farewell song. The royal singers were not all of royalty. They were called that because Mike of the Thunders was Executive Prince Michael Humberg. He was known to be the lead group. There were 5 groups: the Royal Court, Mike the Thunder, the Diamonds, which is who Alexander belonged to. He was a Humberg as well. Jimmy Back, he was not a Humberg, and neither was John. He was with the Billard Singers. Then, as all knew, Danny Lee, and he was a Humberg, and my heart's dream that I could never be. After the show, I went to the tavern and to my table. Tony came over handing me a glass. "How was the show?" he asked. "It was great. Wonder when I will grow out of Danny Lee. Still, my stomach flitters when he sings," I laughed. "He is good. I have something for you," he said, smiling, and be it a booklet. I looked, and it was the cycle tickets. I blinked. "Tony," I questioned. "What, you're off every 5th day from this something to something, so you can go to the concert?" He laughed. I laughed with him. "Patsy, Patsy," those there started to call. I looked at Tony. "My public awaits," I laughed, and up on stage I went and started to sing. They cheered and started to behave themselves. That following month, I was at every one of the concerts, and I was loving every moment of it. I had started out to the tavern passing the Thornton block. I noticed that they were preparing for the sale. I looked over at the girls. I had looked to the blocks every so often in hope one day I would find my sister Jolene. I did hope she had an owner as kind and caring as I did. As I looked to the girls, I saw one that looked familiar. and moved closer. Stepping to the girl, I could not believe it. "Sandra?" I questioned. "Patsy, is that really you?" She called to me. She was chained on the platform with a sight restrainer on. "Sandy, it is good to see you are well," I said happily. "It is good to know you are as well," she replied when a man came over. "Greetings, is this one behaving?" he asked. "Most definitely," I told him. "Miss Patsy Lee, what can I do for you?" he asked. "You can tell me if this girl has to be sold with a bid or if I can buy her straight out," I told him. "Make me an offer," he replied. "I would not know where to start, sir," I told him. "She is rose branded and trains to the brand. 25 to 30 gold I can get for her," he told me. "All right, then 30 it is," I told him, pulling a voucher from my handbag and making it out. I handed it to him. "Would you like her delivered?" he asked. "No, let her loose, and I will take her now. With me," I told him, and he unchained her and took the sight restrainer off, and I looked at her. "This is just odd. You now own me," she laughed. "Yes, I do, and I need to get you clothing." "You're nude," I told her as if she didn't know it. "Really? Well, I am fresh off the cell block. What do you expect, my mistress?" She laughed, and I turned to look at her. "That just sounds wrong from you." We continued to the Dinah shop and into it so I could get her something to wear. "Patsy, or my mistress, I will need a collar," she reminded me as I was having her get what she needed for now, and that was a simple dress and sandals. "Yes, a collar." I looked and pointed to a gold collar. "That one." I told the one there. "What do I engrave on it?" she asked. "Patsy Lee, Southern Tavern," I told her. After a few moments, she handed me the collar and the key. I took both, dropped the key into my handbag, and handed the collar to Sandy. "Put that on. And come on, Tony is going to have every kingdom guard out looking for me, and I am so late," I told her, and we hurried to the tavern. When we entered, Tony came over and looked to me. "Sandy healed. Where in the name of Odin have you been?" "I was about to send guards to look for you." "You are never late and always here," he said, concerned, and I smiled. Tony, calm down. I had to buy me a courtesan," I said, motioning to Sandy. "A courtesan?" he said, looking to Sandy. "Yes, she was on a Thornton block," I told him. "You need to get ready to perform. What should I do with her?" he asked with a smile on his face as he looked to her. "I am sure you will think of something." "Sandy, go with Tony," I said, and moved to go behind the stage. "Yes, she can tell me what she was doing on a Thornton block." I moved from them. I knew Tony liked her and her him, or did at one time. Besides, he could use another server. Chapter 10. I moved up on stage and got ready for the night. It was around 5 passing. I knew that the tavern did not start to fill until around 6 or 7. I was thinking about Sandy and where she was to sleep and all. I had to get her things for a room. I would take the things in the study I never used and place them in the music room and make my study her bedroom. However, I did not have furniture, so off the stage I moved to where Tony's office was in the back. I walked in and he was on the telecom. "I hear you. You will have to speak to Mike on that one," I heard him say as I walked in. He motioned me to a chair and I moved to sit. "Look, I am here, and this is where I need to stay for the time being. Perhaps when this comes to a head, we can get back to it. Right now, the answer is no. Talk to Mike, is all I can say at this time. Right. Look, I have someone in here. I need to talk to. I will get back with you. You need to talk to Mike. He shook his head and set the receiver down and looked to me. Sandy is in the back with Tina and the others, he told me. I smiled. All right. Want her to serve? I asked him. I would love nothing more than to have her here. He replied. Good. I am going to go to the furniture shop. I need to get something for a room for her. I will be back in an hour, I told him. All right, tell Brian to accompany you, he said, and I looked at him. Why? I laughed. Because I would feel better, he told me. Tony, I am not going to get in any trouble at a furniture shop, I told him. Just do it, he then said, and I stood. Yes, sir, I replied. I moved out of the office and into the tavern main room. Seeing Brian, I called to him. We are going to the furniture shop, I laughed. We are? All right, he replied, and I blinked, not sure of what to think. He did not even ask why. He just moved over to me and went with me. We walked to the shop, and I had purchased the items for her room, bed, dresser, and a vanity. If she wanted anything else, we would get it later for her. I had it to be delivered to my apartment. As we walked, I was telling Brian what I planned on doing. He said he would take me back to the tavern and take care of it for me, if I did not mind his assistance. I agreed, handing him the keycard. The day I had bought Sandy was a happy day. That night, we were getting ready to leave the tavern when Brian came up to us. Ready? He asked. I looked to him as if he had already given me back the car key, or the key card. There are no cars. Ready for what? I asked. To go home. He said as if I should have known what he spoke of. Yes, I am ready. We will see everyone tomorrow, I told him. He then continued to follow us. I turned to look to him. Brian, what are you doing? I asked him. Walking with you and your girl there, he informed me. I looked at him and then Sandy. All right, I will ask. Why? I asked. It is Tony's idea, he told me. I laughed and just moved out of the tavern. Now the funny thing was, he was there the next morning to pick us up. Also, seemed like every time I turned around, there stood Brian. I moved into Tony's office. We need to talk. Why is Brian following me everywhere I go and everywhere I do not go? I asked him. He seemed to be thinking what to tell me. The other day, you startled me, and if Brian is with you, I know you are all right, and if by chance you're not, he will inform me, and I need not worry. He told me, Tony, you are really overprotective. You know this. I laughed. Yes, well, I have to protect my singer, he said, with a smile. It was the 5th day of the week. It was also the day of the royal concert. We had went to the tavern as Sandy would serve there while I went to the concert. After taking her inside, I moved to the concert hall with Brian, my new appointed bodyguard. As we entered, he moved to the back of the hall. I was not sure what he was going to do. I moved to the stage where I always stood. You could see the performers better from there, and I did not feel so closed in. The Miracles, whom were a band, were playing random songs as others began to enter and take their seat. A tall gentleman with black hair, blue eyes, came over to me. He had on jeans and a white t-shirt. He looked familiar, however, I did not know him. Perhaps I had seen him at the tavern. "You know, you sure are pretty," he said with that utmost charming smile. I returned his smile. "Thank you, sir," I said kindly. "I saw you just standing here and had to say hi," he said, and that smile of his and those blue eyes were very pleasant to look at. I laughed, looking to him. "Well then, hi," I replied. "Tell me what plans you have after the show," he then asked. "I am going to the Southern Tavern, then home," I told him. "Southern Tavern? How about I accompany you and you have a drink with me?" he asked. "Why would you want to do that?" I asked. "Like I said, you're pretty," he said. "Right," I said, thinking he was drunk or crazy. "Look, let's start over, shall we? Greetings, I am Danny. How about having a drink after the show?" he asked. I laughed more at him, and with that cute little smile of his, I could not say no. "I am Patsy, and I see no harm in it," I told him. "Great, wonderful. All right, here's the deal. I have a little something I have to take care of. You wait here, and I will return in a few moments. Deal?" he asked, placing his hand out. I took his hand and shook it. "Deal," I laughed. As he walked away, I really did not expect to see him again. Alexander came out on stage and started to talk, then sing. Then Mike came out, and he and the Thunder started to sing. I looked for Mr. Charmer. However, he was nowhere in sight. I just shrugged it off and walked as they announced Danny Lee, and sliding out on stage he came, with his makeup, slick hair, and leathers on, and the crowd went wild, and I had all my attention now on that stage as he sung. Now call me blind and dumb, for after his last song, he jumped off the stage right before me, held his hand out, and I blinked and stepped back some. "How about that drink now?" he asked. I was shocked. Standing before me was my dream. That could not be, and my heart's desire. This was not happening. "You're Danny Lee," I said, just as shocked as I am sure I looked. He laughed. "Well, I told you my name was Danny," he said with a laugh. "You did not say you were Danny Lee, and you looked nothing like you do now," I told him. "All right, forgive me. Hi, I am Danny Lee. How's about having a drink with me?" he said with that same charming smile. I did not know what to say. I lost all capability of speaking and just nodded my head. "Great," he said, and took me by the hand, and I forgot all about Brian being there somewhere. All that was on my mind was Danny Lee. He was actually holding my hand. I could not believe this. If I was dreaming, I was really going to hate myself in the morning when I woke, just for waking up. As we entered the tavern, we moved over to the countertop, the corner table. He pulled a chair out for me, and I sat down as Sandy came over to us. He looked to me, then to Danny, and smiled. "Nice date." She leaned to me and whispered in my ear. I pushed her back and laughed. I saw Danny was watching us and looking from me to Sandy, giving Sandy an odd look. "Behave yourself. You're working," I said, laughing. "Yes, my mistress," she replied with a laugh. "My? That explains it. You own her, Danny asked. Yes, I do. Danny. Lee, meet my courtesan, Sandy. Sandy, well, you know. I said, yes, my mistress. Greetings, master. How may a Dinah serve? She then asked. I want a sherry, and bring your mistress whatever it is she drinks, he said as he sat down across the table from me. Soda, mistress, she asked. Yes, I replied. As she walked away, Tony came up and bumped Danny on the back of the head. What have I the pleasure of having the executive prince in my tavern? He asked. Hey, Tony, buying a pretty lady a drink, he replied and pulled out a chair, and Tony sat down. It did not take long for someone to notice I was there, and my name started to be chanted. Seems you're wanted on stage, Tony laughed. It appears that way, I replied and stood. Wait, Danny said. What? I replied. You did not say you were Patsy Lee of the Southern Tavern, he said with a tease. I said my name was Patsy, and I was going to the Southern Tavern. I teased back and blew him a kiss and moved up on stage. After I sung one song, Danny came up on the stage, and he was noticed. Danny Lee going to sing for us, one called out. Only if Patsy Lee will sing with me. Patsy sing with Danny, I heard someone yell, as I was handing him down a mic. What song? I hope I know it. I laughed. Which of my songs do you know? He asked. More like which ones I do not know. I smiled sheepishly. Everyday Dream, he called to the band, and the music started, and I was singing with Danny Lee. I really thought I had been dreaming. The tavern closed, and we were sitting at the table. I was waiting for Sandy to get through. She moved to the table and heeled. Ready? I asked her. Yes, my mistress, she replied. I stood. And so did Danny. Allow me to walk you home, Danny said, and I could not tell him no. Sure, I replied. We said our goodbyes and headed to my compartment. Standing by the door, I looked to Danny. Still cannot believe I am awake, I told him. He laughed. Nor can I. How about spending some more time with me? Tomorrow, we will go on a picnic. A picnic. He laughed and repeated, at the way he said picnic. Truly? I asked him. He nodded. Yes. My heart jumped, and a lump went into my throat. He was Danny Lee. Not only that, he was an executive prince, and I had a brand by decree. I had to inform him of such, for he was an executive prince. I sighed and handed the key card to Sandy. Sandy, go inside and get ready for bed, I told her, and she took the card and moved inside. Danny, you are an executive prince. I have to tell you, by decree, I obtained a lily brand. It would not be proper for you to be seen with me. If it got out, I sighed. He smiled and made a small chuckle. Patsy, I have to confess, I know very well who you are, and that you have a brand. As for others, I care less what they think, even less what they have to say. Now, how about it? He asked, going on the picnic with me. My heart jumped even more. Yes, yes, I said happily. Then at 9 passing, I shall be here to pick you up for our pickanicka. Or pickanaka. Oh, forget it. We just have a pickanicka. He told me, and I laughed. I have to get Sandy to the tavern, I told him. Then we will drop her off on our way. Just be ready at 9 passing, he told me and kissed my hand. Then turned and moved down the hall. I watched him walking away. Lord, I had to be dreaming. My hand would probably never be washed again. But then it would get dirty. That is very unsanitized. Oh, my heart was beating 100 times a minute. I went in, and all I could think about was the kiss on my hand and being with Danny Lee. All right, we are due one more chapter, and then we got to call it quits because I got to go get Cecil from work, which is my son. Okay, chapter 11, and that's going to be the end of video 4. Video 5 will pick up with chapter 12. Okay. The next morning, I woke sitting up in my bed. I could not believe I was actually going on a picnic with Danny Lee. Me? A picnic. Danny Lee. I had to tell myself this was a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I stood and got dressed and got ready to go, and Sandy was already up and waiting. Can you believe I am going to be with Danny Lee? I asked her, and she laughed. You have a fun time, my mistress. You do know he does not stay long in one place. She asked me. I know. I am not expecting anything really. He is an executive prince, Sandy, and a national entertainer. I told her, as I really was not expecting anything more or less. Just dreaming of it, you could say. He is in my dreams, and I know that is where he will have to remain, I told her. She smiled, and a knock came at the door. I moved quickly to answer it. There stood Danny. He did not look like Danny Lee. However, he was still my dream come true, even for one night. We dropped Sandy off at the tavern, then went to the Atlantis Park. He took a blanket out and on the ground, and then looked over at the swings and took off running towards them. I laughed as I watched him slide down the slide and moved to join him. That day, I felt like a youth once again. We actually played on the park equipment, and I had a great time. He actually pushed me on the swings and chased me around the park. The day went by faster than I would have liked it. As it was time for me to go to work and him to do whatever it was he did, he dropped me off at the tavern, kissing my hand. Be seeing you, Patsy Lee, he had said. I smiled to him and moved inside. Sandy came over to me and I smiled to her. I am here, I told her, looking around. Where is Tony? I asked. I am not sure. He had to go out. Said he would be back. She told me, and it was soon time for me to be on stage. That day, I will say, was a dream come true. However, I did not see Danny again, except for being on stage. It was the night of the concert, and he came out on stage as always and then back off. I told myself I was being silly, as my heart sank, for he had not spoken to me, or I him. I was a branded female, a tavern singer, and really a nobody, and he was an executive prince, and as the words of my song, all I can do is have him in my dreams. One night was better than no nights. I could not expect anything else, could I? I had went home that night thinking of Danny, which was every night I thought of Danny. I told myself that I could not be with him. He was an executive prince. What would he see in me? That following day was the 6th day of the week. I had just taken a break from singing and had Sandy to bring me a plate with a burger and fries strips and was sitting there minding my own business, mind you, and eating. This arm reached over my shoulder and took a strip off my plate. I turned sharply, and standing over me with my strip in hand was Danny Lee. I could not help myself from smiling brightly up at him. I was also so surprised to see him. I figured I never would. He had not spoken to me since the night of the picnic. "Danny?" I called out. "Patsy?" he replied the same way, and I laughed. "Strip thief?" I teased. "Yes, they are always good on someone else's plate," he said and sat down beside me. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I came to see Patsy Lee and hear her sing. However, she is not on stage," he told me. "That is for she is taking a break," I told him, as Sandy came over and heeled. He looked down to her. "Hey, little one, how about getting me a sherry and placing it on your mistress's tab?" he told her, and she laughed. "Yes, master," she said and raised, walking away. "So how about buying me a drink?" he asked me. "I believe I just did," I replied. "My thanks, my lady," he smiled. "You seriously came to see me?" I asked, thinking I misunderstood him. "Yes, I did. I contacted your compartment. However, you were not there. So I took a chance and came here," he told me. "My second home," I smiled. "I was wondering if you would like to go to a picture show with me," he asked as Sandy offered up his drink, and he took it. "I thought I would never see you again besides on stage," I said honestly to him. "Patsy, you will see me as often as you would like to," he informed me. "That would be every day, if I had my way," I told him. "Then, my lovely lady, allow me to give you your way. If I am in the kingdom, then the Southern Tavern just became my new hangout. Just for you," he laughed. I smiled, not sure what to say. However, I was working. "Technically, I am working, so back on stage I must be," I told him. "I will be here listening," he said with a wink, and I smiled and moved to the stage. My wildest dream came true. I was actually dating Danny Lee. Me, a nobody, was dating Danny Lee. It had been almost a full year. He was not about much, as he was part of the Sultan circle, executive circle, and plus he was an entertainer, so that made little time for socializing. Danny was always the gentleman. Never he not be. He always kissed my hand before leaving me, and he never made an unworthy move towards me. It had been on the 12th day of the 4th month, the first year's cycle of the year 64. The circle had been gone for about a month. I was really missing Danny. Actually, he had not been gone for this length of time in almost a year's cycle. The longest we had ever gone without speaking was maybe 3 or 4 days. I was on stage when I saw him and 3 others enter the tavern. My heart jumped and I was relieved all at the same time. He was back home. "Good people, let me take a moment to rest, and I shall return," I said and placed the mic on the stand and moved off the stage. I noticed with him was Mike. That would be the first I had seen him off stage. I moved up to the table as they all stood. Danny placed his hand out to me, and I took it. "Greetings," I said to them. "So this is the star of Southern Tavern, and the female that has stolen my little brother's heart away," Mike said as he stood. "That would be me," I laughed. "Patsy, Mike. You know. The others are my brothers, Scott, Paul, and Alex. You know as well," Danny said, waving to each, and each bowed to me, and I had to laugh. They were all so charming. "Nice to meet you all," I said. "We just returned, and I had to let you know I have missed you," Danny said. My stomach flittered. "I am glad you are home. I have missed you," I told him, and waited for Sandy. She moved over to the table to serve them, and back on stage I had to go. I sang 2 more songs, then joined them at the table. We were talking about music mostly, when Paul motioned to the door. "Danny," Paul said. I looked over to the door. And there were 4 men entering. Their dress told they were of a band of bandits. I looked to Danny and the others. "The fools actually followed us here?" Alex said as if he could not believe it. Scott looked over to Sandy. "Girl, be quick and fetch Tony for me," Scott told her. Danny took my hand and raised me from the chair. "Darling, go back on stage and start to sing. Keep an eye on Tony. At his signal, announce the tavern is closing. Then I want you and Sandy leave and go to your compartment. Please, I will meet you there," he told me. I was not sure as to what was going on. However, I nodded and moved back on stage and started to sing. I watched Tony move over to the table and Sandy move closer to the stage. Tony then waved his hand to me. "Ladies and gentlemen, friends and fans, I am regretful to announce that the tavern is closing in—" I looked to Tony, as I was not sure what to say. He held up both hands. "In about 10 passing of the minutes. We ask you finish your drinks and have a safe venture home. Until we meet again, go with all my love," I said and blew the crowd a kiss. Everyone started to talk, and I moved off the stage. Taking Sandy by the hand, I moved to the door. As I opened it, Brian and 2 others stood waiting. "Come, please," Brian said, and they placed us in a coach. We got to the compartment. As we went inside, Brian entered with us, and the other 2, I noticed, remained outside the door. "Brian, what is going on?" I asked. "I do not know. Danny and Tony just said to remain with you," he told me. I moved to the kitchen and fixed his drinks, then sat on the couch and waited. I was very worried about Danny and the others, more wondering what the men wanted and who they were. I turned the vision on, and Sandy and I sat watching a movie. It was about 3 hours passing that a knock came to the door, and I jumped to answer it. Brian prevented me, and he answered it. Danny stood in the doorway, all bruised up. He looked to me, then Brian. "You get back to the tavern," he told him, and without a word, he left. Danny moved into the compartment, shutting the door. He looked worn out and very bad. "Sandy, get me the med kit," I told her, and moved to him, leading him to the sofa as Sandy came in with the kit. I started to place cream and bandages on his face and hands. "Everything all right?" I asked him. "It will be. I just had to make sure you were safe, and no one followed you, or there was no other trouble," he told me. I kissed his head and his cheek, where he had been hurt. I realized just how much in love with Danny Lee I was. It was far from just being infatuated with him. That night, I would not let him leave. Well, I really could not have prevented him, I know. However, he did remain with me, and for the first time, as we had been dating, our night was spent together.